Hey, my friends. So this week is our last week we're working on our alebrije, and what I want to go over are all the different materials we can use to decorate them. So I have markers and crayons and paint all laid out, and I'm going to make that a little bit larger. There we go. So I'm going to start with the salt dough. So using our crayons, you can color and add designs to our alebrije with our salt dough the same way you would on paper. Now you need to be careful how you're holding it, making sure that as you color, you're holding your alebrije sculpture still, so that way you're not breaking parts of it. We can use our crayons to color stripes or color different patterns and go back and add dots later, because dots were a main part of it. So just like that, we can make color patterns. We can add in some of our dots. It is a little bit tricky to get your hand in there how we're holding them. There we go. So different ways that we can use our crayons to decorate our alebrije. Now our markers are going to work very much the same way, and I'm actually going to show you two of them. So our Sharpies and then our regular Crayolas. So if we come in with a regular Crayolas, we can go ahead and just draw right on. See how the colors are much brighter and show up much better. With the markers, it's because the liquid ink actually will soak into the surface of your salt dough and it will show up much better. So we can even come in with some of our line patterns that we've done. So it gives us an opportunity to add more controlled detail that we couldn't do with the crayon. So while the crayon works very, very well for adding color, if we're just filling in areas, if we want to add other details, our markers do tend to work better. And even better than that are our Sharpies, because these have more intense ink. So our colors will show up better, our details will show up better. So here, let me go ahead and move to our ear. So if I'm going to add with my Sharpie, this would be one where I could add different line details that I can't do with my other markers because of how they bleed and run together. So notice how there is some bleeding, but not nearly as much. And I maybe could have dried my alebrije a little bit more. So I can draw in my different details, and I can add my different patterns with my markers this same way. Now with the paint, I'm going to look at doing two different things. And I'm adding some other smaller details and patterns and designs. So my older students, some of the designs that I have shown you to use are traditional symbols from the Oscal area. And these are some of those patterns. Using those to decorate our alebrije works out really, really well. Now our paint, two different things can happen. One, we can use it just to add color, and we can go back and draw over top of it with our markers. Or two, we can actually paint some of our designs with them. Now I'm doing all of these different designs and all of these different mediums. That's the material we're working with, is our medium, because not everyone has access to all of the same materials. So, a little bit more paint. It's not quite enough. So if I go ahead and just paint this, I can also then go back and draw designs over top to add even more detail to it. Now I can also, and I'm doing this kind of quickly, I'm not taking my time as much as I would really want you to take your time. I can also add my stripes of color. If I wanted to add painted color stripes, going back and forth. Now I need to be careful when I get close to the other colors, because if my colors touch, they will mix together. So some of this is going to need to happen after it's dry. So right now I am going to go ahead and pause the video to let this dry so that I can show you about adding some other details over top of the paint. All right. So we're going to be back in just a minute, guys. Okay, so the second part of our salt dough. I've pre-painted some of the spaces. It's not quite entirely dry, but we're going to go ahead and take a look at this anyways. Now, because I have a base color, what we can do is go back and paint over top if we wanted to. So you have the color, which is a background color, and then if I come in and add white spots, of course being careful as I move it, that would be one way to come in and add other details. Now I could do the same with my blue. Around that space, and we can paint in our details. So having it already painted and then adding our details over top just adds a whole nother layer of color and detail. See, that's not quite dry. However, purple, if we wanted to do something else with it, because there's really only so much detail you can add with your paintbrush as you're painting. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of detail to get really good lines. So if we wanted to add more detail over top of our painted color, marker is the way to go. Now, permanent marker is going to work best. You need to make sure it's completely dry, otherwise your marker is going to pick up some of the paint, and then I have a little bit of a problem. So I'm going to try this. I'm going to support my whole sculpture as I draw. Actually, I'm going to do the side of the trunk because I think it's going to be the easiest to hold and demonstrate. Panel over my hand because it's all wet still. So from here, now with my fine tip marker, all I have is black. But if I draw in different details, you can see how the line designs are showing that way. Now if I did it with my regular permanent markers, it's going to be much thicker, but I also have the choice of colors as I add them. So I could still do the idea of dots and using different colors I'm able to create different details as we work our way through. So once you've decided how you're going to add your details, you have other options for adding other details afterwards. So my older friends, my second, third, fourth, fifth, I gave you different patterns to look at that are traditional Oscal patterns that I want you to think about trying to incorporate into your designs as you're adding them to your alebrije. My kindergarten and first graders, I want you to think about the patterns that we worked on with our dots and our lines and our shapes and adding some of those to your alebrije, either coloring it first and drawing some on top, or like when we worked on the tail here, just drawing in your stripes of colors or some of your line designs. And remember, any of the materials we have to add color will work. We went through crayons and regular markers like the Crayolas that are washable, and we went through permanent markers like Sharpies. You can use paint. Any combination of those will work. Just remember, if you're drawing on your paint, give it time to dry. Otherwise, you get it all over yourself and make a mess. All right, my friends, I cannot wait to see what you come up with. Have fun.